Hello, and welcome to a new Du Bois series that I will be doing. It is a soccer show that will be breaking down certain parts of the game, analyzing specific games, looking at teams, stuff like that. Sometimes doing Premier League review weekends. It is called Into Touch, which is the British way of saying out of play, but, figured that'd be clever. I did release a version of this video earlier. However, I got a few complaints about my selections from people who I will not mention, and they convinced me to add a few people, or one person, into my team of the season, which is what this video will be about. I will be mainly doing this myself, however you might get some guest appearances from David and Jonathan. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, like I said, this is my 2020-2021 team of the season. These are all the players that have performed the best over, well, I guess in certain positions, that have performed best this season. It is mostly statistical. I tried to keep it mostly statistical. There were a few instances where I needed a tiebreaker to decide who would get the position. And that tiebreaker was trophies or wins or, stuff like that. So we can go ahead and get started with the strikers. I think the first obvious choice was Robert Lewandowski. Robert Lewandowski netted 41 goals this season, breaking Gerd Muller's previous Bundesliga scoring record of 40 goals by, just one. He did it on the final day in the 90th minute, I think. He not only did he have 41 goals this season, he also had 7 assists, and Bayern had a total of 24 wins in the Bundesliga this season. One other point I would like to make about this team this season, there is no European stats in here. It is just based on their domestic league performances. So those are the only stats I include in here. I think he got 5 or 6 Champions League goals, but we're obviously not including that. So he's kind of the obvious choice for Bayern this season, or for the striker this season, because of his 41 goal season. I mean, it doesn't matter what league you're in, really. If you're netting 41 goals, that's pretty impressive. Next up on the list is Harry Kane. I know I may seem a little biased to... Oh, wait. Wrong scarf. May seem a little biased to Harry Kane, but I don't care who you support. You could be an Arsenal fan and still accept that Harry Kane has had a remarkable season. Not only was he the top scorer in the league with 23 goals, he was also the top assister in the league with 13 assists. Now, there were, in the complaints that I was receiving from the, again, people that I will not mention, they pointed out that Harry Kane, while he performed well, he may not make it over, say, Lionel Messi if you put him in a striker position, or I can't remember who else. I think someone tried to argue Edinson Cavani. But when it came to picking Harry Kane, I chose him because he is the second or third player ever to be top assister and scorer in the Premier League. I mean, like Lewandowski, that's pretty good. And I know Tottenham finished 7th. I don't want to hear about it. But you have to admit that Harry Kane kind of deserves this a little bit. Alright, moving on to the midfield. Now, going from left to right. Sorry if there's if you hear children screaming in the background, that's my siblings. Going from left to right, we start with Mohamed Salla. This was the one that I was convinced to include in the team. And, I mean, it was kind of close when it came to Salla and who I picked before, who I will not mention. I mean, he had a really good season, too. He scored 22 goals, not as many as Kane. But, I mean, still 22 goals is really good. I can't remember how many assists he had. It was something under 10. I know that. So, again, not really as good as Harry Kane. But he has been one of Liverpool's best players in a season where Liverpool were not exactly the best. And that's not necessarily their fault. It's, you know, the injury problems they had in defense and, you know, having to start Nat Phillips. And their best signing was Ozan Kabak, who was on loan from literally the second worst team in Bundesliga history. So, I mean, first, I don't understand that. Why sign Ozan Kabak from Schalke, who at that point in the season had the lowest points ever in the Bundesliga and had conceded 63 goals and only won 3 or 4 games? I mean, why sign the defender for that team? What is that going to give Liverpool, who play in the Premier League, which is more challenging than the Bundesliga? I will say that. Anyway, so yeah, Salla, I feel like wasn't necessarily my first choice, but from a non-biased standpoint, the other choice was Son. From a non-biased standpoint, I will give him this other midfield position. Alright, moving on to the central midfield, and the first person there is Bruno Fernandes. There was a little competition between him and Lionel Messi. Messi did have more goals and a better pass completion rate than Bruno Fernandes. However, Barca did not do as well, and that's kind of what broke the tie for me with Bruno Fernandes. He had 18 goals in the Premier League this season, which is still really good. A lot of them were penalties. And 12 assists, which is one less than Harry Kane, but still not as much. I mean, he has been one of United's key players ever since he signed for them. He kind of saved their season last season, got them in the Champions League. Of course, they were eliminated from that in the group stage this year, but he's just been a key midfield player. Just one of those players that, like, obviously you have really good stats for him, but also you're like, you know, he holds up the midfield well. He's a leader on the team, so you can't necessarily, with those players, sometimes statistically prove that they're the best, but when it comes to their just presence on the team, you're kind of like, that's a key man, that's a main man, he's world class in that. Of course, Bruno Fernandes also does have the statistics to show it. If he were to have scored less penalties, he would have been more of an obvious choice than Lionel Messi. But, I mean, United are in the Europa League final and they finished second in the Premier League. I feel like that's a better reason to choose him over Messi. And while we're on the subject of Messi, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant here about him and Ronaldo. They are not as good as they used to be and should not be included all the time in things like this. I have watched and heard a couple team of the season's, you know, like articles or videos recently, kind of inspired me to make one of my own. And they all like to include Lionel Messi and none of them really have a very good explanation. Just kind of like, he's Lionel Messi. He was the GOAT. However, he no longer has just kind of the same. I mean, he scored 30 goals in La Liga. Great. It's still not as competitive as the Premier League. It was a little more competitive this year, but it was still kind of the same three teams, Atleti, Real, and Barca. So when it comes to scoring goals against Celta, I think it's what their first thing. I know it's called Celta Vigo. When it comes to scoring against Celta Vigo, I mean, it's pretty easy. And he had 5 Champions League goals this season. But a lot like last year, though they didn't go out as spectacularly, I will say that, they weren't as good in the Champions League. Barca just weren't that good of a team, and while Lionel Messi is still class, I mean, I consider him one of the greatest players of all time. I know I am more of a new fan, or more of a more recent fan, and so, you know, I may not necessarily have the same appreciation that these older fans have for Messi and Ronaldo. That's another thing. Ronaldo definitely has declined. He did win the Golden Boot, but Juventus did even worse, and he was left off he requested a rest, which seems a little suspicious for me because that's Cristiano Ronaldo. Why would he ever request a rest? But he did not start in Juventus's final game, which would have, I mean, if they won it, they would have gotten Champions League. They would have gotten Champions League football next year, and they did win it with Cristiano Ronaldo coming off the bench. I mean, it may just be a coincidence, but I just don't think that they are necessary. I don't think they're the same players that they used to be, and they shouldn't be included in things like this just because they used to be the best players in the world. All right. Anyway, that was that was a little bit of a rabbit hole. Sorry, but. Moving on in the midfield, my next selection was Marco Sirente. He's not necessarily as much of a household name as some other midfielders that come to mind, like Kevin De Bruyne, or even Dele Alli, who had a horrible season. He scored less goals than Jesse Lingard last season, this season. I mean, that's kind of sad. Well, in the Premier League. But, of course, Atletico won the title this year. Of course, Atletico won the title. But Marco Sirente, sorry for the baby crying in the background. Marco Sirente was a key player in that. A lot like Bruno Fernandes or those players I was talking about. He was just kind of like, you know, if you took him out, there'd be a stark difference in Atletico and their team. And I haven't watched very many La Liga matches, but I have seen highlights and stuff. And I mean, he's a really good player who's kind of coming into his own a little bit. He had 11 assists this season and 12 goals, which is pretty solid. Statistically better than some other players like Kevin De Bruyne. Who, honestly, for me, was really hard to leave out of the starting squad. I did put him on the bench. But Kevin De Bruyne didn't really have the same season as he did last season. Of course, he won the league, but so did Sirente. And again, it kind of came down to, of course, Kevin De Bruyne was also injured for a while. It kind of just was like, you know, it could have been one or the other. Both were really key to their team this season, but I chose Marco Sirente over De Bruyne because he played more games, and he just kind of seemed a little more solid than De Bruyne. Anyway, moving on to my final midfield selection, which was Thomas Muller of Bayern, obviously. Of course they won the Bundesliga. Of course they won the Bundesliga this season. They always do. But he, like almost all the other midfield players I selected, was key to that just like style of play and the way that they were playing. He got 18 assists for the third year in a row. He was the Bundesliga's top assister, and 11 goals, which is also really solid. Obviously not as much as Lewandowski, but if you think about it, I mean, just looking at Bayern's dominance, 41 goals from Lewandowski, plus these 11 from Muller, plus assorted others and stuff. I mean, I was very surprised when they did not go further in the Champions League. But again, PSG were also really good. Another thing I'd like to point out, there are no people here in the French league. That's a little bit of my fault because I was not able to find a good statistics for the French league, so there aren't necessarily people in there. But I would like to give a shout out to Lille for winning the Ligue 1, for being the first team besides PSG to win it in 11 years. I mean, that's and I'm very sad to point out that PSG is Poch's coach, and he went and lost Ligue 1, which they've won for 11 years straight. So kind of sad, but oh well. So yeah, just kind of a shout out to Lille and all the other Ligue 1 players that performed really well, but I just couldn't find statistics for. I was talking about Thomas Muller, wasn't I? Well, now I'm not. Moving on to the back line. Just give me a second. Okay, again, going from left to right, we have Luke Shaw. It was very close between him and Andy Robertson. And I kind of chalked it down to, this was one of those tiebreakers. I kind of chalked it down to Man United's performance versus Liverpool's. Again, Liverpool, not necessarily their choice or their fault that all their players were injured, but still. United are in the Europa League final and placed second in the Premier League. And Shaw's kind of, I didn't watch Shaw, when he first came around, but I mean, he had a really good season this season. He had 5 assists and 1 goal, which is pretty good for a left back. Andy Robertson had 7 assists and 1 goal. And he's just kind of broken through since his freezing out by Jose Mourinho. I know that was 2 years ago, but I mean, still, it's just kind of like a touching, I guess, human story of Luke Shaw. And yeah, I mean, he wasn't necessarily the obvious choice, but a lot like with Marco Sirente versus Kevin De Bruyne, or Fernandes versus Messi, it just kind of came down to a few things. Moving on, in the 2 center back positions, I have Milan Skriniar and Ruben Dias. Just like to point out, it's kind of funny that Milan Skriniar plays for Inter Milan. But both players have been very good for their respective teams, Inter Milan and Manchester City. Ruben Dias more so than Skriniar, honestly. Manchester City kept 19 defensive clean sheets this season, and Inter Milan kept 17, I think. That's and obviously when you look at clean sheets, a lot of the times you look at just the keepers, but of course that's also a lot up to the defenders. And of course Inter Milan won Serie A, and Man City are likely to win the treble. And Dias, I have more praise for Dias than Skriniar. Dias has kind of transformed City's defense from whatever it was last year to this solid unit that can support the switching around in the midfield and attacking that City like to play. And him, along with John Stones, have just been, key to City keeping their dominance for the back half of the season. In my right back position, I've put Asha Fakimi. He's also not necessarily a well-known name. He signed for Inter from Real Madrid this season after 2 seasons at Dortmund. And, I mean, he's just another one of those players that's like, you know, if he wasn't there, you would notice. He makes, you know, all the runs down the wing, and just created a lot of chances. I'll have to admit I don't have any statistics for him up right now, but I did choose him off of statistics, obviously. And, I mean, name another right back that was better than Hakimi this season. And in goal, I have chosen Ederson of Manchester City. He won the Premier League Golden Glove with 19 clean sheets. He's had a few really good saves. And it was between him and Jan Oblak of Atletico Madrid, and I chose him because he had 1 more assist. And that does bring me to another point of Ederson. His ball distribution is one of the best in the world when it comes to a goalkeeper. He, of course, got an assist, or he assisted Ilkay Gundogan in a goal against Spurs, which murdered poor Davinson Sanchez. But, I mean, Ederson has kind of recovered last season's doldrum or dip in form, and, you know, is one of the best keepers in the world, I would argue. On the bench, I've kind of made it more of an honorable mentions. Erling Haaland, Leo Messi, Jan Oblak, Kevin De Bruyne, Jadon Sancho, Andy Robertson, Sergio Ramos, Luis Suarez, and John Stones. All of these players performed really well this season. And a few of them were very close to actually making the lineup, but statistically over some of these other players, I just kind of had to choose the other ones. This brings me to the final part of our show, the manager. I feel like it's kind of obvious, Pep Guardiola, and I'm going to use these last 5 minutes to kind of praise Man City a lot. Man City this season have just been
really incredible.
But I mean, they won the Carabao against Spurs. They went out in the FA Cup semifinals, which is honestly expected. I mean, a quadruple is one of the hardest things for anyone to ever do in anything, no matter how deep your squad is, like Man City. They're, of course, in the Champions League final and are favorites to win it. And this is all, I mean, the players have been key, but Pep Guardiola has been a master manager this season. He recovered their early season rut, I guess, and after November, they did not trail after their November game against Spurs. They did not trail a single minute until they lost to Manchester United in late February. So I mean that's insane. They had a 22 or 23 game winning streak in all competitions. They got past the quarterfinals for the first time in quite a while. They've already won 2 trophies this season. And they're favorites to win a third, and I mean, Pep Guardiola, again, one of the best managers ever, in my personal opinion. He won the Champions League with Barca, won it with Bayern. Yeah, I kind of wish I was a fan for that. Pep versus Jurgen Klopp, Dortmund versus Bayern, Der Klassiker, Champions League final. Thank you, Champions League scriptwriters, for that one. Anyway, Man City, I mean, have just been brilliant this season. So that's all for today's episode. Be looking for next week's episode, or maybe even one coming out on Friday, breaking down the Champions League final. And just kind of celebrating the season or analyzing the season of whoever wins it. I think it'll most likely be City. But who knows? Maybe Chelsea can pull it off against City. But anyway, that's all for today's episode of Into Touch. And yeah, we'll see you next time.